Hello, welcome to another episode of Getting Back in Shape using exclusively 19th century and early 20th century physical fitness methods. Today's episode, we're going to be looking at dumbbell exercises. And if you haven't already seen it, if you're coming to the series totally new, I strongly suggest you watch the first video we did in this series, the introductory video, which explains why I'm doing this whole series and trying to get back in shape using these methods. And also, I strongly suggest you watch the last video we just did, which is all about the history of the dumbbell from the 1600s to the present. Both of those will be linked to in the video description below. You may notice that all of the dumbbells we'll be using today are made of wood rather than iron, like modern dumbbells. And there's a good reason for that. The dumbbells are much lighter, but they're used in a significantly different way. You're working a lot more different parts of your body, and also the objective was more than just building arm strength. So today, I know the dumbbells are thought of primarily as an arm strengthening implement, right? For doing your presses or your curls or whatever muscle isolation. Back then, that wasn't the case. In fact, I would say that arm strength wasn't even the primary objective in using these types of dumbbells. In selecting the exercises that you're going to see today, rather than pull from just one particular author's method, I've selected from a number of methods from the mid-1800s to the early 20th century. And the reason is to show an interesting variety of all the different ways that they were using the dumbbell in the past, give a really good spread of what that looked like. In fact, I came across so many exercises that I thought were quite interesting that we may have to split this into two videos. We'll see how much we can pack in today. Today's exercises are going to draw from both American, British, and German techniques. As with our previous video on 19th century calisthenics, we are starting with the easiest exercises and progressing to the more difficult ones. The elements of posture used in this exercise are essentially the same as those discussed in our previous video in this series about posture, a link to which can be found in the video description below. So the first exercise we're going to do comes from Sergeant Lamas from England, and it's going to use 3 or 4 pound dumbbells. These are actually 4-pounders, but they're slightly desiccated. It's come out to about 3.5. And the exercise involves deep breathing, breathing being a very important part of physical culture in the 19th century. As the dumbbells are raised, one inhales slowly through the nose, filling the lungs to capacity. Then, as the dumbbells are lowered, one exhales slowly through the mouth, completely emptying the lungs. In this exercise, the arms remain extended and the same height as the shoulders throughout, working the deltoids, and are crossed in front as much as possible, contracting the pectoral muscles and stretching the rhomboids. This classic chest expander exercise comes from Ed James's treatise of 1878. However, it can be found in many other texts of the era, which claim that after practicing for a while, you will be able to touch the dumbbells behind your back. I should mention that even with these light weights, it is very easy to injure the rhomboid muscles of the back, if this exercise is at all overdone. The next exercises we're going to do involve some dumbbell swinging from an author named Gustav Hermann Boges. This book was released by Spalding in the early 1900s, and because it was put out by Spalding, what better dumbbells to use than Spalding dumbbells, which were probably produced in the 1890s. Lighter dumbbells for this particular exercise. It's not a strength building exercise, it's more for mobile flexibility to loosen you up. And the grip he uses is a one-handed grip. This would be called by different authors the bulb grasp or the ball grasp. One-handed grip using the index finger to make sure that the dumbbell is aligned with your arm.
In these swings, the arms become as passive as swinging ropes, pulled by the force and inertia of the dumbbells. These exercises are very similar to some Indian club swinging exercises. Although I find the version with clubs superior, using the dumbbells instead is useful if one has low ceilings or a smaller space.
The next exercise we're going to do comes from a gentleman by the name of Moritz Kloss from Germany. And like the last exercise, it uses the so-called bulb grip or ball grasp, and which is interesting because this model shape of dumbbell with a round bell or end was very popular in America and Germany, and it specifically reflects the type of exercises they were doing in those countries, meaning gripping it by the end. For instance, if you look at what they were using in the UK, they did not make this shape of dumbbell. They had cylindrical ends because they were not gripping it in this way. And I want to share another antique dumbbell we have here, which has spherical ends or bells that are almost in the shape of an egg, which actually makes them much easier to grip. I'm not sure who produced these. There's no maker marks. They're only indicated to be 3/4 of a pound. However, for the Kloss exercises, we're going to use these 2-pounders. And the amazing thing about this exercise is that there are 4 arm positions, 4 hand positions, 2 directions, 2 types of motions, and 2 heel positions. And when you multiply it all together, that gives you 128 variations on this one exercise. It's pretty amazing. So we could literally spend an hour or 2 going through the variations of this exercise. That's going to take too long to go through today. But if there's interest in this exercise, then please feel to indicate that in the comments, and I could potentially do an entire video just on the variations of this one exercise. Today I'm just going to do 2 or 3 of the variations to give you an idea of what it looked like.
I should mention that grasping the dumbbell by the end places its center of mass farther away from your hand, creating more torque, leverage, and resistance, and making the exercise more difficult. In this way, we see how the genius of these authors maximize the usefulness of these lightweight dumbbells. It's important to note that each of these different grips, orientations, motions, and subtle variations in the exercise works the muscles of your wrists, arms, and shoulders in significantly different ways. Again, it's why the form and technique matters.
This next exercise from Kloss, instead of using a circular motion, uses a figure 8 motion. So what that is essentially instead of doing this or this, you're doing this figure 8 pattern.
In this variation, I am rising on my toes in sync with the hand movements. My heels are lowering, but not actually touching the ground, giving the calves no rest.
I imagine if you're doing all 128 variations of this with your arms extended, it'd probably take at least an hour, hour and a half, and that could get extremely tiring. Next, we're going to get into a series of exercises from an author that happens to be one of my favorites, Madison Watson, who was active in America during the period of our Civil War, the 1860s. And Madison Watson uses a shape of dumbbell, which became known as the fancy style of dumbbell, which looks like this. And in fact, this is exactly to Madison Watson's spec of about 11 3/4 inches long by, I believe, about 3 3/4 inches wide, the widest point on the bell. And this first one is called a single bell exercise because you're only using one dumbbell gripped in either hand.
In this exercise, what you may not see is that the rear arm is being stretched as far as possible behind the back, from shoulder to hip, creating an extreme stretch in the trapezius muscles.
This next one is one of my favorite exercises from Madison Watson, and even maybe in this whole series, because it's just so unique. There's nothing I've ever come across that's quite like it. Essentially, you begin by positioning your dumbbells in front of you completely horizontal and completely palm up. That's the key thing. And then you begin cycling them like so, fully extending the arm and not hitting them. Keeping it fluid. And then reverse direction. And reciprocating. Now my arms are already starting to get a little tired, which is kind of amazing for 2-pound weights, but it's not nearly over. Now they're completely pronated, and we do the same thing. And reverse. You can see that the difficulty in this is in the positioning, not the weight. reciprocating. Arms are incredibly tired right now, but it's not over. Now we do everything but vertical. Arms are about ready to fall off, but it's not over. Hardest one yet. This one especially, it's very difficult to keep the bells completely vertical. Interesting thing is, this is so little weight, apparently 2 pounds, but keeping your arms extended constantly without rest and doing all those motions with a proper form, it's incredibly taxing, and I challenge any bodybuilder with huge arms to try to do that. I'd also like to mention that if you go up in weight with this exercise, with the old dumbbells, of course, they're much bigger because the wood is lighter, so they have to be bigger in addition to being heavier, right? So that makes the exercise even more difficult to do, keeping the correct form without clacking them together.
This amounts to half of the exercises that I did this day. However, due to the large amount of footage, I decided to split the second half into a part 2, which shall be posted shortly, and which includes more full body motion exercises with the dumbbells. If you'd like to see this and more videos on physical culture history, please feel free to click the like and subscribe button below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.